hopefully everyone can hear me. Just Chad said, I'm not sure how many people understood. I'm Carrie Knott. I'm the grain crops agronomist stationed here at UKREC in Princeton. And so I'm just going to take a few moments to talk about some soil management and community. I'm probably going to focus this morning. I'm going to focus this morning on, let me see, trying my audio as well. Is that better, everyone? So I am going to focus on some research we've done the last 3 to 4 years on double crop soybean management, where we were looking, our graduate student was looking at intensive management. So is it going to pay off? What can we do? We increase yields of double crop soybeans with different agronomic sort of practices. And so really what we did, and for those of you that have been to the field days the last few years, you've seen Catherine, my student, present sort of preliminary results. Actually, these are the final results of the 3 years of data. And what we were looking at was sort of this base treatment, where we were looking at a seeding rate of about 150,000 seeds per acre. We, of course, in double crop soybeans, we do not recommend a seed treatment, so we had no seed treatment. And we only applied foliar pesticide applications, which would have been Quadras Top or Warrior 2 with Xeon technology as needed. So that was based upon our university thresholds. And from there, we just kind of started adding some treatments. We had the base with seed treatment, we had the base with seed treatment, and then just a blanket application at R3 of those foliar pesticides. From there, we just started looking at higher seeding rates, which I know in the past, these seeding rates for double crop have occurred, but we've backed down quite a bit. So we really were hoping that this would be an extremely large seeding rate, okay? Then, of course, we add the seed treatment and stack it up with the R3 as well. Based upon 3 years of data, we did this for 4 years, but the first year was a preliminary year. So the year that had all these treatments was from 2017 to 2018. And what we found is that when we harvested following wheat at about 18 to 20% moisture, we had a higher yield. And so this isn't really ground shattering information, right? We know if we plant earlier, we're going to get higher yields. And in most cases, the average of these two planting dates was about 10 to 12 days difference. There was actually 1 year we had 3 weeks span, and that had to do with significant rain that came in after that first harvest that kept us out of the field until probably July 7th or so. And so that really impacted this yield. And so it's kind of nice to see that some older data that said with double crop soybeans, you can expect about a bushel per day of loss. And so we're really finding that as well, because we, on average, had about 10-day difference between this early and normal. When we started looking at seeding rates, we were a little surprised by this finding, in that when we seeded at 150,000 versus the 225, we also had much lower yields, okay? This surprised us until we started looking at our harvest populations. And when we, just prior to harvest, we estimated the population. What we found is that at 150,000, we were only harvesting 115,000 plants per acre. For double crop soybeans, we know that about 140 to 150 is really that target population that we want to be harvesting. And so it wasn't until we got up to that 225 that we really attained the minimum harvest population that we recommend. And I'll be honest, I'm really surprised that we had so much stand loss, because we did account for the germination. And so we still don't quite understand what happened to all this stand that we had early season and how we lost it. Possibly it could be due to these excessive seeding rates and the plants just sort of getting smothered out. But we really don't know at this point what that was. In terms of seed treatment, we really weren't surprised by this. There was no yield advantage between using seed treatment and not in the double crop system. We did have one year that maybe it was starting to look like we were going to see some advantages, but that year was extremely wet and we just kept having rains, which was a good problem to have. But the soil conditions stayed saturated. It was a little bit cooler that year. And so that's not that surprising, right? We know cool, wetter soils, seed treatments will probably be beneficial. Next, we looked at that R3 sort of blanket application or prophylactic application versus as needed. And so from 2018 to 2019, we were able to get these on as needed versus the prophylactic. So in 2018, we really only needed the insecticide application, and I think that was at about an R4 application. Last year, 2019, we went ahead and applied an insecticide, and then I think the following week we applied a fungicide because the weather conditions were looking very conducive for frog eye leaf spot development, and also we were starting to get some infections and infestations of that disease as well. And so what we found is that overall, and again, those were about an R4 application as well, between R3 and R4. And so they were just a little bit later than that blanket R3. But we're very surprised in that we were seeing a yield advantage of about 4 bushels. So agronomically, you know, I'm pretty excited about that information. And we're probably going to do some additional testing on that. And so if we look at these treatments, and so again, I'm just showing these real quick to remind you of the actual treatments themselves. And we look at sort of the yield advantage, we see that really it was this highest, most intensive management treatment that gave us the highest yield of 61 bushels per acre on average. And then followed by about a 56 bushel per acre for that lesser managed. So as an agronomist, it was interesting to see that we could sort of bump our yields by 10 bushels. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is, does it pay? And I'm not going to address that at all. Thankfully, Jordan Shockley is going to be on right after me, and he's going to talk about this data in terms of whether or not you get your return on investment. But like I said, as an agronomist, we were pretty excited to see that we could kind of tweak these double crop soybean yields just a bit. With that, I just wanted to say thank you. I did forget to mention up front that Kentucky Soybean Promotion Board did fund all of these years of research, but their logo was at the top. They've graciously continued to support an additional project where we're going to test R3, blanket R3 applications in a full season and double crop system as well. And just see if we can continue to see that trend and just make sure that nothing's changed and that our university recommendations don't need to be tweaked just a little bit to make sure that we get the best advice to you guys. With that, I'm going to stop. I had a few more slides, but if you want to see what those were about, they were about some full season stuff. Information, you can maybe look at the recordings that we'll have later. So with that, were there any questions in the chat, Colette? Okay. If you guys think of questions, please text me. I think Colette put my number in the chat box. Many of you have my number as well. Thank you guys so much for logging on. Please know that we understand how painful these Zoom meetings can be. We would rather have you in person, sweating it out with us, but it's just not possible. And so thank you all for joining. And if you have questions, please let me know at any time.
Carrie, I've got a question.
Okay.
First, is the audio better? Let me ask that first.
Much better. It's fabulous.
Okay.
You don't sound like you're in a tin can. It's great.
Okay, great. So you did this in several years where we had what really is above average rainfall late in the
Correct.
season. And we've had several years in a row with above average rainfall. So there's a separate question in there of, is that the new trend? Is that what we should expect now? But,
Right.
you know, we normally think about double crop beans as being water limiting as one of the biggest challenges. And so just, if you don't mind to discuss that just a little bit.
Right. And so relative to our results, I think 2016 was a bit dry, like a normal Kentucky double crop season. But starting with 17, 18, 19, and let's be honest, even 20, I know we are drying up in some areas, but yesterday we had 1.5 inches here almost, well, 1.25 inches. So that drink of water for the double crops is really going to get them pretty far into the growing season, assuming we don't have 95-degree temperatures every day to sort of evaporate that. In terms of, you know, if these sort of wet weather patterns continue, I think we might be able to push some higher double crop soybean yields, right? Because we'll have the water, we can maybe be able to pay for some more management. In terms of the climatology question he asked, I'm not touching that, right? I have no idea. I'm not a climatologist. However, the last few years, it seems to be a trend that we are wetter and things are changing with our environment. So we can't ever predict the weather. However, if we keep seeing these trends, I think we could really push these double crop yields pretty high.
And I think recent memory, if we have recent memory bias, it's the last 5 or 6 years we've been wetter. And so it probably favors some of this additional management, probably favors some additional disease pressure and some things like that as well that we don't normally consider being an issue in double crop soybeans. So